Greetings from the Axgard Armories on the plain of Kaldheim, where it's kind of like Ravnica, but with more trolls. My name is John from the MTG Thoughtcast, and this is Pack It In, where we're going to open up ourselves a booster pack and get as many cards as we can into your commander decks. Today, we have ourselves Kaldheim. Welcome to Kaldheim. A favorite set of mine. I really like this one. As someone who, as joking about, not a humongous fan of Ravnica, but in a setting like this where they, again, I'm struggling with this wrapper for some reason. They once again did two-color guild sets, or two-color guild theme, more or less, right? Where all the different realms of the Kaldheim was different tribes and peoples living there. I think this one landed super well. It's a very favorite of mine, and I'm very excited to dive into this. Kaldheim, for those maybe not super familiar with this world, it is a Norse myth sort of realm. So we've got like Norse mythology, like gods and monsters and tribes and peoples and things like that, warriors and berserkers and tribemen and stuff like that. It's very cool. And this thing that they did is that the world itself is comprised of its own separate, like, realms. Sort of Dominaria-like, per se, where, like, all the different groups of people lived within a realm, and then the realms was all within the plane of Kaldheim. And every single one of these tribes of people, they were all divided amongst two color sets. That's hence why the Ravnica comparison here. So we begin with Hagi Mob. 4 and a red for a 5/4 Troll Berserker with Boast. For 1 and a red, it deals 1 damage to any target. Boast was an activated ability mostly found on Berserkers and Warriors that you could activate the ability if the creature had attacked that turn. And it's super cool because you could activate it in the middle of combat. You could activate the ability after combat damage is dealt, all the way up to basically your end step, as long as the creature has done an attack. Didn't even need to connect either. That was super cool with this. As for this card itself, it's fine, I suppose. It's, like I said, with being able to activate Boast during combat, if this thing is blocked, it at least has the potential to trade up 1 point higher than its base power allows it to, so that's kind of always super cool to look out for as far as a combat trick is concerned. Next up is Master Skald, 4 and a white for a 4/4 Dwarf Warrior. When it enters the battlefield, you may exile a creature card from your graveyard. If you do, return target artifact or enchantment card from your graveyard to your hand. I think that's a little expensive for this trigger ability, and I don't necessarily remember if there was any sort of like gameplay variance or anything that cared about when creatures left your graveyard. Yeah, this one's not incredible, but it's a dwarf, so that's neat. Being able to recur anything, I suppose, even on weird utility like that, could serve its purposes. Draugr Thought Thief. 2 and a blue for a 3/2 zombie rogue. That when it enters battlefield, look at the top card of target player's library, and you may put that card into their graveyard. You kind of do a force surveil for them. That's super cool. It's very cool, sort of like anti-top of the library shenanigans, where if somebody is trying to set something up specifically there with a scry or a surveil, or they've tutored something like an enlightened tutor or something like that at the wrong opportunity, you have the option to take this guy and get that surveilling for them. And then even if they haven't set up the top correctly, if you take a look at their surveil, their top of their library, and they've got something coming up that you really don't want to see, that's what makes the stuff like the Fate Seal on Jace the Mind Sculptor really strong. I like this. I don't remember ever seeing this card before, but that's a very cool one. I like that ability a lot. Death Knell Berserker, 1 and a black for a 2/2 Elf Berserker, that when it dies, if its power was 3 or greater, you make a 2/2 Black Zombie Berserker creature token. So this one really wants to encourage always going to combat, and then specifically this wants to go swinging with some kind of modifier onto it in some capacity that allows it to be stronger than what is printed here. It literally only needs a +1/+1 counter, or a variety of the enchantments or equipments that are in this set as well, like the runes and stuff like that. Those were very fun to do in draft. Otherwise, I think I would rather just take a dissented Descended Deserter, is that the card? The one that just always pops out at 2/2. I think I would prefer that, but you need something silly for your elves, I suppose. It's cool. It's Broken Wings again. I think we've had this card before in one of our other booster packs, but as a quick reminder, it's 2 and a green for an instant that destroys an artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying. Yep, that's nothing much else to say about here. It's cool that there's a flavor text here about Finn the Fangbearer here. He's a legendary creature from this set. He fought and took on the World Serpent. Again, very Norse myth stuff. Speaking of basic cards here, Revitalize. 1 and a white for an instant, you gain 3 life. Draw a card. I think we had this chat very similar with Potion of Healing from the Dungeons & Dragons set we did not too terribly long ago, but yeah, easy. I mean, it's not an exciting card draw spell, but if you're doing some life gain shenanigans or you just need a spell in white that draws you a card, Revitalize is fine. Narfell Kennel Master, 4 and a black for a 4/4 zombie berserker. When it enters the battlefield, up to 2 target creatures each gain 1/0 and indestructible until end of turn. It's interesting, I suppose, that this allows you, like, remember the that zombie thing that we were just talking about, or the elf that dies into a zombie later on. So like, this is a card that you could do in a follow-up after that elf, right? This comes down a couple turns later because of the difference in mana cost, but this just comes in and is a very, very good way to allow you to go swinging in with your creatures that A, either want to go to combat, B, want to do combat damage, or C, have a activated ability of like Boast or something like that that it wants to do. It's cool. I like it. I don't really quite understand where like the Kennel Master part of that comes in as far as giving indestructible. I guess like wolves or something like that are a big like boon to give their warriors indestructible, but neat all the same. Scarecrow Friend. We love scarecrows. Joseph's a big fan of scarecrows. Scorn Effigy then is 3 colorless mana for a 2/3 artifact scarecrow with Foretell of 0. A common mechanic that was shared amongst all of the kindred tribes on Kaldheim is the Foretell mechanic. During your turn, you can pay 2 and exile this card from your hand face down. Cast it on a later turn for its Foretell cost. So you can't play Foretell cards off of Foretell the turn that you send it off into exile. And you kind of, if you're playing a lot of spells like this, you make a big like secrets pile. One of the biggest themes of sort of like Norse mythology is all like the omens and prophecies and things like that that are scattered amongst, like, we've all seen Thor Ragnarok. It's all kind of like that sort of thing where it's like the doom impending and these horrible monsters that are forscribed by the oracles and stuff like that. So the idea behind this mechanic is that you can send these cards off into exile. Your opponents will have no idea what those cards actually are until you go to play it. In the case of Scorn Effigy here, just on a later turn, you can just have a 0 cost to 2/3. That does have some utility to it as well. There was some, not necessarily casting 2 spells, but like multiple spell casting during a turn was also a theme amongst some of the cards here in this set. So just being able to have something like this when you need it to be, as a free sack fodder, free casting of a spell, something to that degree, it's neat. He's a fun little guy. Bind the Monster, a blue for an enchantment aura. Enchants a creature. When this enters the battlefield, tap enchanted creature. It deals damage to you equal to its power, and the enchanted creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. We've seen effects like these before, like claustrophobias and encrusts and stuff like that. At the cost of, costing 2 less than its mana cost, the creature that you are tapping down immediately does its damage back to you. I don't know if that's good or not. Like, maybe if you're tapping something down that's maybe like, I would never probably want to take more than 4 from something like that. If you're looking to get a creature off the board that is like power 5 or greater, you're probably better off just using straight up removal than something like that, but it's neat all the same. Roots of Wisdom. 1 and a green for a sorcery. Mill 3 cards, then return a land or elf from your graveyard to your hand. If you can't, you draw a card. I like cards like these a lot. These sort of effects I've never really been a huge fan of, the ones that go a certain number of cards into your library or your graveyard and looks for a specific criteria of cards to either return to hand or return to play or something like that. But I love that they've been doing certain ones like this one, where while yes, it still looks for a specific criteria of cards, if you cannot match that criteria, it still gives you value. So the floor with a card like this is 1 and a green, you mill 3 and draw a card. That's still playable. That's very, very cool. And then the ceiling of this then is that of the stuff that you milled, returning something from your graveyard to your hand, that's kind of also like card draw, because it's a specifically card selection. You get to pick something from amongst the cards that were put there from the spell's own ability. I do like this. It's very, very cool. Very cool for graveyard decks. Big fan. Spectral Steel. 1 and a white for an aura. Enchant a creature. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2. And then for 1 and a white, exile this card from your graveyard, return another target aura or equipment card from your graveyard to your hand. Now see, like, this is a better returning effect than that dwarf we saw earlier in the pack. That, like, you get a big boon to a creature early, and then later into the game, as that creature and this have now died, this serves a later purpose later in the game by being able to return something else important back to your hand. I dig it. That's very, very cool. Oh, and speaking of really cool boosting style effects, Elven Bow. A single green mana for an equipment. That when it enters the battlefield, you can pay 2. If you do, you create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token, then the bow attaches itself to that token and gives an equipped creature +1/+2 and reach. So this it doesn't look modal, but this is kind of like a modal equipment. So you can either play this for just its green, and then it equips anytime you need it to for 3, or you can play this card for 3 mana, and it'll be a 2/3 with reach, just immediately out the gate, sort of like Living Weapon, I suppose. Living Weapon that you have to pay for. And there was a whole cycle of these that they came in with different creatures. Ooh, got one of the runes. These are very cool. Rune of Flight. 1 in a blue for an aura rune. It's a subtype on the auras. Enchant permanent. When Rune of Flight enters the battlefield, draw a card. As long as the enchanted permanent is a creature, it has flying. And as long as the enchanted permanent is an equipment, it has equipped creature has flying. So this was very modal to these as well. You could just throw this straight onto a creature and just immediately grant its boon to that creature. Or you could attach this, you could essentially enchant an equipment, like make the equipment stronger, that like you could move the equipment around to other creatures, and then the flying would be granted to multiple creatures as long as the rune stayed on the equipment. That's very, very cool. Hey, we got ourselves a legendary creature here for our rare. Sigrid, God Favored. 1 in double white for a legendary human warrior. It's a 2/2. Flash, first strike, protection from god creatures, and when Sigrid enters the battlefield, exile up to 1 target attacking or blocking creature until Sigrid leaves the battlefield. Much like Banisher Priest, Fiend Hunter, but then just also like it can come down at instant speed because of Flash, and just naturally also has first strike, so it takes out little tokens as well, like in the middle of combat or something like that. And just for the flavor reasons of like the other like Norse gods can't touch her or anything like that. It's very, very cool. That's if you're playing the sort of like get things into exile, stacksy, taxi kind of stuff. Very, very neat. Oh, we didn't even find any snow cards in this booster as well, but snow was a theme of Kaldheim as well. Snow plains and a human warrior. Like I said before, Kaldheim is one of my favorite sets in a very, very long time, and there's a ton here from just this draft booster that could find its way into some real low-power decks, casual-friendly tabletop stuff, Kindred-style related things. If I were to pick something out of this that I would be playing, I do really like the Spectral Steel, an enchantment that gives you a boon early and then acts as a recursion piece from your graveyard later, as well as like it's not casting a spell from your graveyard either. So in some sense, it's kind of like an uncounterable returns a thing back to your hand. I'm a very big fan of that. Runes, I love the runes as well. Rune of Flight is also, you all know that I'm an Enchantress player, so you sort of all kind of figured that I was going to be picking the enchantments here. But yeah, Spectral Steel, Rune of Flight, those are very, very cool. I'm a big fan of those cards. Roots of Wisdom also does have some very good use as well. Again, for the fact of like it never really misses. So that's a cool little piece to have if you're a graveyard-centric deck. And that'll do it today for this pack of Kaldheim. Thank you so much for joining me on this glorious adventure into battle. And we'll see you all again next time here on Pack It In.